Sometimes when our Kundalini is awake and our Kundalini has arisen, or maybe it hasn't arisen but it's awakened, the altered states of consciousness that a Kundalini awakening can bring about can mimic the feeling you would get if you were enlightened, if you were experiencing a fully realized state. The chemicals that your body is going to be producing can sometimes feel exactly like that. A lot of us, when we are experiencing an overactive third eye or an open crown chakra, or your Kundalini feels like it has gone there, you lose your connection to ground level. You lose your connection with so many things. Now, when you are in a state like that, you're blissed out. Everything to you in that state feels very peaceful. It feels like you're very detached. It feels like you're just going through life, but nothing is affecting you. You feel quite neutral. And you're lost in that space. And in that space, sometimes you also receive beautiful golden nuggets of wisdom coming through you. But in those altered states of consciousness, there is sometimes very, very little grounding. So sometimes it might feel that you need to ground yourself. And at other times, folks, you feel like you're flying. You feel like you are in that state and you don't want to go into that. From away from that state, you feel love, you feel compassion for everybody. It's a very, very blissed out, altered state that is very much like you being high on something, but you're feeling this sweet, sweet anandamide, which is coming in droplets. And this is when your pineal gland is going through its decrystallization and you can feel it. Now, what happens when you're feeling all these things, but your lower triangle has not really healed, or there are still things that you're carrying in that, or there are still blockages, or your Sushumna channel is not fully clear. Sometimes your Kundalini energy can go, maybe it didn't get a safe passage through Sushumna, so that it's got Ida and Pingala. Right? So it's got other ways, and you may experience a snippet of this, but it's not fully that until it has gone through the Sushumna, the middle channel, right up, clearing through everything as she goes through all of these centers. Now, what happens if for whatever reason she hasn't, but you can feel that activity there? Now, what this usually means is that yes, your crown chakra might be open, it might be very active, a third eye might be very open, or just your crown chakra, and you can feel connected with everything up above you. You can even feel the wind, you can feel the air up here, you can feel quite sore up here. Sometimes maybe you might be itching this bit quite a lot. You might even feel a little sensation up here, but generally you will feel a breeze because this is open. It's open. So imagine that there is something that's completely open, it's bare, it's sensitized now, and you can feel it. You can feel it, you're receiving all these downloads. But having said all of this, and you're experiencing this place, and you feel quite peaceful, you feel quite a lot of love for everybody. Now, what happens when your downward triangle is not fully balanced? When you start to come out of that state, and there are various ways and reasons why this state will start to come back. So you will slowly come back into the world because you'll be integrating all of this. Now, what happens is, imagine that there's a cauldron of boiling water, and that vapor from the water has come to a certain point. Now, instead of all of the vapor going up and finding its way, there might be some vapor that goes up and it's found its way right up here. And at the same time, this is quite open and you're feeling that. Now, when you're feeling that, remember, the channel is not fully clear, but there will be some of this going up, which is creating this feeling, but it won't be a full rising that has the potential of then coming back and you being in the material world, fully experiencing the material world, fully being there and fully able to cognize and even have emotions, have feelings, live intensely, feel everything intensely with hypersensitivity. You're highly sensitive and you can literally feel that life. In that state, most of us who are in that state will either not want to come back down, or if you do come back down, you're suddenly faced with a chunk load of backlog, literally backlog of things that have not been addressed, haven't been integrated, haven't been dealt with. And it doesn't have to just be some, mental things or things that come from our bodily consciousness. No, there could be other things from other realms, other conscious, other parts of you that you've decided that this is the life, this is when I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to come to a point where I experience a fully enlightened, a fully liberated, a fully Jivan Mukta state where I can still live as being fully realized, fully open, fully in that state without me being entangled in this life. And remember, you can appear to be entangled, you can appear to be all of these things. And the closest example that I can think of is Shirdi Sai Baba. Those of you who know of this, so if you don't know about him, you can Google him. He was a fakir, so a fakir, a beggar, a saint, a guru, a sadguru, people have experienced all sorts of things with him. Now, he lived in a dilapidated masjid. He used to speak to people in parables. Now, he wrestled as well. He did all sorts of things. He also mourned at the loss of somebody. He cried. He used to get into rage, right? He used to get so angry at times. Yet, he was always engrossed in Satchitananda. So whilst on the outside it appears that you're really entangled, you're going through this, it is an example of the intensity with which you're living life. You're not harming life, you're living life intensely so that you're not denying yourself the feelings that you're having, but you're living life with all of your feelings, with all of your emotions. But you're not identified with them, you're not associated with them. You can still remain in that Satchitananda. So that is what you call a Jivan Mukta, someone who's liberated. Now, you know that you're truly there when your Kundalini decides to now descend, or now when you're slowly coming out of those states. You're either going to be bombarded with all these things suddenly, and some of you then go into a state of being numb, some of you become depressed, some of you start to feel nothing, some of you get really listless, like there's no meaning, or some of you come to a point where you think, well, I've cracked the story now. I know what we're all about. So now there's no zeal. I mean, what's the point? It's like this is a story it's like reading the end of the book, and then you don't want to read what happens in the middle of the book because you've read it. But if you've ever read a book and if you go straight to the ending, right? Or if you read a book where you've read from the beginning to the end, there's going to be a big difference in the way that you have experienced that ending or experienced the whole book and then the ending. Right? Now, if you experience the end and you get to the end, some of you might feel shortchanged and then you can't be bothered to go through the whole book again. So it's a bit like your Kundalini awakening. So if you have experienced the upper rising without you going through the lower rising, and you're not going through everything, so the whole story is not being told, you're not experiencing the whole story, you then eventually, some of you could also end up in a path of you becoming a guru, you becoming a teacher to others, you becoming in this state where people come to you because you're able to access these states. However, folks, that again, we have covered this in another post. If you've gone into that state, and yes, you're experiencing all this and you've got all this wisdom coming to you, but if your lower triangle, if for any reason is not balanced, so that your Sushumna was not clear when you had the rising, that's when at some point at the upper triangle, when you're experiencing all of these states, there is then a danger of you misusing supernatural powers, of you getting carried away with Maya, which is the illusion, for you getting carried away with all these things. And so in a way, you then sharing all of these gifts with everybody and experiencing these supernatural powers and thinking that actually I'm helping everybody else. At some point, that in itself becomes a hindrance, because you develop a spiritual ego, or you develop an illusion of aggrandizement, entitlement, that now I am the Sadguru, I am the Guru, and I am the spiritual teacher, the spiritual teacher. But in fact, you already are a spiritual teacher within you when the Guru inside of you is awakened. So it's not that one person is and one person is not. We always carry the potential of being all that, because we are all that. So it's a question of you coming into a tune with that, not knowing it. So it's not that someone has told you and you've read about it and you're listening to somebody, and so then you really start to believe it. No, it's not even that you're believing in something, but no, you've had the direct experience of that. So to have that direct experience, sometimes our mind can also make things happen, as we know, right? So we are our thoughts, we can think something and something really happens. Similarly, we can simulate a Kundalini rising without actually having a fully blown Kundalini rising, although your Kundalini is awakened. This is why it is a long process. When you get to that state of, right, my Kundalini is now fully awakened, then, there is no comparison, there's no competition. You're just in a completely, you don't even have to talk about it. You don't have to explain it. You don't even have to tell anyone that this is where I am. And you may be very fortunate if you meet people like this, or people like this may not even come before you as that. Yeah, and you may not even be able to recognize it in someone else unless you have come to that particular state, and then they will come in your vision and you're able to experience them, or you can experience yourself in them because you've already come into that state. So a Kundalini rising may not always be a Kundalini rising unless it is directly experienced. For you to know that it has been directly experienced, so did you already have that experience before you even knew the word Kundalini? Before you even knew all of these terms? Before someone even said anything to you, or you even read anything? Did you already have that experience before? Or did you start to experience these things as you started to get to know or give explanations as to other things that you might have been experiencing, like simply an opening of your chakras, you becoming aware of these energy meridians, these subtle centers inside of yourself? So when we're in that state, folks, in that state of where your upper chakras are a lot more active and you're sort of up here rather than down here, or in the middle, where you're balanced, that state, unless it is a real, fully, proper rising, and you are fully integrated in the sense that you don't have a bias, you don't have a spiritual bias, you don't have a religion, you don't have a dogma, you don't have a belief. You're fluid. You're absolutely fluid at that state. Unless you're in that state and you're fully integrated, which means that you're fully functioning as you don't have to be fully participating in society, because you could still be living the life of a hermit somewhere else, but you're still attuned to nature, you're still attuned to everything around us. So it's not that you've just sort of escaped and you've gone. It's a little something to think about. Is our lower triangle fully done with when we experience these altered states of consciousness? And why is it that when we de-experience them, or then we start to experience just very little, and suddenly we are thrust in being highly sensitive, intensity, and feeling almost bipolar, and going through one emotion one day, another one the next day, because we haven't fully come to a state of us emitting a certain frequency, holding that. Instead, we start to absorb a lot of that. It's okay to be attuned to everything, and you are, because you're highly sensitive and you will feel all of these things, but we don't want it to be part of our makeup, so we don't want to make it ours, although you could also make it yours without becoming identified, associated, or entangled inside of it. With this, folks, a lot of love to you as always. Happy awakening wherever you are. Remember, that's where you're meant to be. No judgment, lots of acceptance, lots of love. And wherever you are, it's good. It's wherever you are. You don't need, there is no hierarchy in an awakening. There's no hierarchy generally in anything. It's just a concept that we have created. So lots of love, folks. Take care.